I've spent my life in courts. You reach an age like I do where you sit back and you think there are better ways to resolve matters in the commercial world, and I think we need to be just a bit smarter and a bit more nimble, and address issues earlier on. And when I started, I did the first probably major mediation in Australia with Sir Lawrence Street, and that was in Spedley, 1992.
I was involved.
Spedley, I think, spawned something like 55 pieces of litigation were involved in the Supreme Court. And Lawrence used to just say, he came along and he said, we should try and settle matters. And there was incredible cynicism. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, fancy trying to settle matters.
Yes.
I mean, using a mediator? I mean, it was absurd. And he used to start a mediation, and he often would bring an orange into the room, and he put an orange in the middle of the table, and he would say, "Joe, do you want the orange?" And Joe would say, "Yeah, I want the orange." "Tim, do you want the orange?" "Yeah, I want the orange." "Why do you want the orange, Joe?" And Joe would say, "Well, I'm a high-performance athlete. I actually want it because I've been exercising this morning and I just want the juice." "Tim, why do you want the orange?" "Well, I'm a lousy cook, but I do quite like the zest from the skin." And Lawrence would say, "So, Tim and Joe, you can both have what you want."
That's right.
But he also used to then say everyone should walk out of a mediation feeling just a little bit disappointed.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
And but that's 1992, so that's what's that in my maths? 35, 30 plus years.
Yes.
But there we go from 30 years ago, complete cynicism about even this concept, where now it's a global phenomenon in most jurisdictions.
Yes, yes.
Singapore government's really behind it, for example, mandating it there. To now this, I think, continual evolution as to how we actually resolve bigger issues with more people.
Yes.
In a legal sense, people who are outside the contractual relationships. They're not the lender, they're not the employee, but there might be others who are impacted. So it's really just an extension of that. And I suspect if we look, in 10 years' time, we may look back on this podcast and say, that was interesting. They were talking about that. That either fell over.
They got nowhere, those two guys.
Those guys, they're off on a folly. Yeah. Or it was like the Lawrence Street moment where it started to, we started to have a more mature approach to resolution of, in situations where there are parties involved, as I say, which are not necessarily in a contractual relationship.